Thank you for tuning in to October 2024 Director's Cut. We have Director of Mineral Resources, Nathan Anderson, who will give a brief intro.
Good morning and welcome to the October Director's Cut. I am Nathan Anderson, Director of the Department of Mineral Resources for the state. I have been in my position now for about a month and have been working to meet everybody at the DMR, as well as lots of other great people from around the state. Mark Bohrer has been gracious enough to provide these updates for the past few months and will do so again this month while I get up to speed. I look forward to meeting you all in the future and working with everyone. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have the Assistant Director, Mark Bohrer, who will share the production data with us.
Well, good morning. This is the October Director's Cut going over the August 2024 production numbers. In August, we were at 1.179 million barrels of oil per day. That was a slight increase from the July numbers, about a 0.8% increase. And it's about 7% above the revenue forecast. We've been expecting this production uptick for some time now based on the completions we saw in August, and that it seems to have come true. We're at 1.148 million barrels of oil a day from the Bakken and Three Forks formations. That's roughly 97% of the state's production. Crude oil prices in August were down a little bit, but today the oil prices have moved up again, so we're a little bit above the revenue forecast for the oil price numbers. Gas production, that's good news there. August, we were at producing roughly 3.5 BCF per day. That's up about 1.8% over the July numbers, but our gas capture is up at 95% now, which is a 1% increase over the July number, so that's all good news. Wells permitted, we're at about 100 permits a month. We've been at that number for about 3 months now, and that's the number we feel we need to be at to allow production to grow that 1 to 2% that we're seeking. Rig count has been steady. There's 40 rigs running today. Even with all the mergers and acquisitions that have been going on, our rig count has remained fairly steady. We have 376 wells approximately waiting on completion. We feel that's our new baseline. That's kind of what the number's probably going to be. It's just how things work out in the field. We had a uptick in a number of inactive wells. We're at 1,903 wells inactive, but the wide fluctuations in this number from month to month are not unusual. Wells get shut in for different reasons, but one of the big reasons they get shut in for is for fracking of offset wells. So when you have these large pads now with 10, 12 wells on a pad, it doesn't take too many pads to add up to a significant number of wells that get shut in for that offset well to be fracked. Completions of September, we're at 58. That's a disappointing number. We're hoping it wouldn't be that low, but there could be some explanations for that. It could be a delay in reporting, a lag in when the reports come in, and so we're hoping that's what it is. There also could be more 3-mile wells that are being completed now. Those take longer to complete, so the number of wells a crew can complete per month is not as large as if they're all 2-mile wells, and we're going to start crunching the numbers on that, analyzing that data to see what the relationship there is. Our number of producing wells in August was 19,117. That's an all-time high. 16,962 wells are produced from the Bakken Three Forks. That's roughly 89% of the wells that we have in the state. Initial grant information, there's still reclamations ongoing, and those will keep ongoing here into the fall as we wrap up the reclamation season. Activity on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, their overall production was 196,000 barrels of oil per day. That's up 3% from last month. which is good news. It was down 3% last month, so it's relatively steady on a longer trend average. There's one active drilling rig on the reservation. There's approximately 7 wells waiting on completion. Our drilling count remains steady due to mergers and acquisitions, but we expect it to increase into the mid-40s over the next 1 to 2 years. There are 18 frac crews currently active. We were at 20 last month, so that's a steady number. The statewide gas flared volume from July to August decreased, which is good news, 35.7 million cubic feet a day to 881,000 million cubic feet per day. And as I mentioned, our gas capture increased to 95%, and our Bakken gas capture also increased to 95%. Gas capture details, as I said, statewide Bakken's at 95. Fort Berthold Indian Reservation overall is at 95, with the trust being at 97% and the fee at 87%, which is it was at 94% last month. That is a smaller portion of the production on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, and we had some information that there were some line repairs going on the reservation, so that would have impacted that gas capture number. The areas of the state that we watched that are typically been problem areas for gas capture, those are been pretty steady. A lot of those fields are smaller fields, so there can be wide fluctuations if just 1 or 2 wells are not selling gas for whatever reason. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Yes. We have a question from KFYR.
Okay.
How have the wildfires across Williams and McKenzie counties impacted the oil production? And what do you think the numbers for October will look like when they're released a few months from now?
I'll let Justin answer some more with specific numbers that he's gathered, but just in general, overall, obviously, the wildfires were very devastating to the industry and the landowners and the people that live out there, in particular. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's been very dry. There were wells that were shut in. As a precautionary measure, the industry responded and helped out with fighting the fires. So overall, I think the response was good. It's just an unfortunate incident with the dry conditions we have out there, and the industry, I think, has been very responsive in helping out and being proactive in trying to prevent future fires.
We have 3 more questions. One from KFYR again. As the Department of Mineral Resources, how do you see the election impact on oil and gas production, depending on who goes into office?
Well, as everybody knows, there's an election coming up here in a few weeks. The election itself will probably not have an immediate impact, but the policies that are implemented will have an impact, either positive or negative. But in general, it's probably not tied so much to our election here in the United States, but what's going on in the world with different geopolitical regions and what is going on there, that probably will affect it more than our election will.
And we have a question from Anonymous. Good morning. Thank you for this insightful presentation. Exxon confirmed it is seeking buyers for select assets in the Bakken Shale play in North Dakota. Any indication of which asset Exxon is looking to divest or sell down? How much oil and Exxon produce from the Bakken in August or September, depending on the latest available data?
We have heard that they are looking to sell some of their assets. I have not reached out to Exxon. They did reach out to have a conversation with me. I just haven't had time to get back to them on that. But I'm until I speak with Exxon, I would not feel comfortable commenting on what assets they're looking to divest.
And then there's Wow, more questions coming in. Why have rail shipments out of the region jumped? This looks like that would be a Justin question.
Sounds like it just.
Out of region jumped in the past year. And then there's another one. Dapple funnel. Yes, so that would be a Justin, but there's an email one here. There are 20 parcels being offered to upstream producers during the upcoming Montana Dakotas next week. Based on level of interest that you're hearing about, how do you view the upcoming sale?
I have not personally reviewed those parcels to see where they're at. In general, overall, I know there are some parcels that are attractive that will draw some interest, and there are some parcels that probably will not attract much, if interest at all. So, but that's all I know in a general sense.
I think that should be it. Thank you. Oh, there's a question.
Just a follow-up on the wildfires. Did the industry lose any assets in the fires?
They lost some structures. I haven't heard of any. Pardon?
Cord gas plant, Toyota Ray gas plant, I think was impacted.
Yeah, the Cord gas plant at Ray Tioga was impacted on a well-specific basis. They'd lost some buildings on site and things like that. There were no oil tank fires that we're aware of, which is good. So yeah, it was. It could have been devastating, but I think overall we came out okay.
So the Ray gas plant, are they shut down or are they still operating?
I can address that.
You can do
Yeah,
that.
Justin's going to address that.
Thank you.
And then we had a couple of questions that came in earlier also. One of them is, what's the outlook for crew production this year? We expect it to remain steady to slightly increase. Obviously, October's numbers will be impacted by the wildfires out there. And Justin's going to get into a little bit of that. And another question is, what do you see as the 2 or 3 most important factors that will shape crew production in North Dakota over the next couple of years? You know, we have an infill drilling program going on here in the state. They're drilling lease line wells. We have refrac candidates out there that there's a tax incentive for those. We anticipate that the operators will take advantage of that. There's secondary recovery projects that are pilot projects that are being tested, and the success of those will have an impact on production in North Dakota. We also are seeing more 3-mile horizontal wells being drilled. We even have had some 4-mile wells permitted. I believe that's 3 or 4 that we've had permitted. So those will be interesting to watch. The economics for the operators will help. For those 3 and 4-mile wells, will help them develop some of the tier 2 and tier 3 acreage that was previously economically challenged. So we're excited about those projects. And of course, oil price has a big impact on activity. And as was alluded to earlier, the election this fall will have an impact, either positive or negative, and what federal policies that come out of that, and of course the federal lease sales have a smaller impact, but they're important also.
I have another question. How much oil did Exxon produce from the back end in August or September, depending on the latest available data? What is Exxon's share of back end's total production?
I do not have those numbers in front of me, but we can get those numbers and reach out to that party. Is that it? Should I get out of here before they ask any more?
That should be up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
That Excel file on your website would
It
have.
is.
We now have Justin Kringstad with Director, Pipeline Authority.
Thanks, Bridget. Good morning, everyone. We'll get rolling here as soon as we get some slides queued up there. And Perfect. Yeah, we can jump right into the second slide on production from around the region. Our neighbors to the west, in eastern Montana, they currently have one active drilling rig. We've not seen any substantial production increases. When we look at the total basin-wide production, this will be an important piece of some of my comments later surrounding some pre-filed questions that came in. The basin as a whole, if you look back to that February, about 1.325 million barrels per day that the oil transportation network had to be handling. We're about 80,000 barrels a day now, shy of some of those yearly peaks that we've seen thus far. And so I'll wrap that in here in a moment on some of the transportation dynamics. The one number I wanted to highlight on this graphic, obviously, no major shifts in that month-to-month change on oil and natural gas production, but another record set on the gas oil ratio down at the bottom, just below 3. And what that means again to the layperson, roughly 3,000 cubic feet of natural gas come up to the surface with every barrel of Bakken crude oil that's produced. And so you can see that trend continuing to rise, and that's just a factor of how the reservoir performs over time, and that is something that we're continuing to model and predict and forecast going forward. We will see ebbs and flows, particularly on strong production months, weak production months, but again, record-setting level now, I believe 3 months in a row of record GOR numbers. Some movements here between what you saw in the July numbers to August. The big change, obviously, on the refined. June, July was heavily impacted by the Marathon Petroleum Refinery in Mandan being down for their maintenance that takes place every 7 years. That was coming back online in August, so we saw some of those barrels then shifting off of some of the other alternative modes, getting back into that pipeline network, heading over to that Mandan facility. And so we can see again those shifts. Pipeline continue to dominate the marketplace as far as how crude oil is being moved from the region to areas around the U.S. And then I'll touch here on the rail side. We did see a little bit of an uptick in some of the crude by rail numbers. Not a major jump. I know there was a pre-filed question that came in and a question that was asked about what was causing some of the big jumps in crude by rail. I don't know if I'd classify this as a big jump. It was, an increase month over month, but I would say it's still relatively within kind of the realm of expectations, right around 2 unit trains per day, with roughly a very small percentage of that going. Let's go. I'll talk about destination here in a moment. Let's look at price, and then I'll circle back to destination. The one thing, it's always pad 1, pad 5, at least in recent history, have been the highest priced markets. Again, pad 1, pad 5, we have no pipeline connectivity to those refining centers today, so we're reliant on crude by rail in order to serve those light sweet refineries with North Dakota oil. Pad 5 did jump up a little bit stronger in price versus pad 1, and we saw that reflected in July's numbers as far as the destination of where those barrels were headed, almost exclusively to that pad 5 marketplace. And again, that's almost exclusively to the Pacific Northwest, up in the Washington State area. There's roughly 1 train a month heading to those California markets. So again, pad 5, it's going to be split, where those refineries are located, Washington State, California being a much smaller destination, with Washington State remaining the primary target for those crude by rail movements out of the state. We look at pricing today, where things are settling in at. Positive news in kind of the regional, our local network, our local market for North Dakota oil, 88 cents over WTI at that Clearbrook hub. Again, that's a confluence of some Canadian pipelines coming down out of Canada on the Enbridge mainline system, and then you've got the U.S. barrels coming on the Enbridge system to Clearbrook before it continues on towards those Great Lakes refineries and ultimately could take a path down to Cushing or to the Gulf Coast. That Brent WTI spread, just under $4 a barrel. Again, that's still not at a level that, in my mind, starts heavily attracting crude by rail movements. Typically, that starts to happen once that WTI Brent spread is north of $5 per barrel. Imports, exports, again, no major changes. Things continue to be kind of within the realm of expectations there. On the gas capture side of that 5% flaring, the lion's share continues to be flaring from wells that are connected to gas gathering systems. Again, somewhere along that chain of movement limitations causing at least a portion of that gas at that well location to go to the flare pit. And then only 1%, that's been a pretty sticky number, as you can see on slide 12 over time for the last couple of years, month over month, 1% of that gas being flared from locations that did not have a pipeline connected at that time. Good news, continuing to see our gas gathering, our new wells capturing gas versus new wells producing gas, that number staying hand in hand. So that's always a good sign that, trouble doesn't appear to be ahead on that front. EIA oil price outlook, they did take a pretty, I would call it meaningful haircut on their oil price outlook here. I want to say it was around an $8. I'd have to look back, but an $8 cut from what they were projecting in September to what they're putting out now in October. You can see they are expecting maybe some near-term strengthening as we head into 2025 before things start sliding again. And so that's then getting reflected and pulled back into some of my models for where we see production heading. On the natural gas front, again, things continuing to look very strong in the near term. And then as we talk about month over month, just the need for additional gas gathering, compression, processing infrastructure in the state continues to remain strong. On the transmission side of the natural gas world, as we look at our pipeline networks, August was a pretty quiet month, not a lot of big maintenance or any big events on that front. We look at the Northern Border pipeline, that market share, again, with some softer numbers. And as you'll see here in a moment on slide 20, some softer BTU, that market share dynamics staying around that low 80s percentage. Bakken natural gas and Northern Border versus Canadian volumes coming down through that system. And then last but not least, just a quick construction update on the Wahpeton project. You can see the table down in the bottom right. That's the latest that I have that got filed last week with FERC. The major topics, the stringing, the bending, the welding, almost either complete or very, very near complete. Got a couple images there, that incredibly rich Red River Valley soil there, that topsoil being redistributed and then getting ready for the reclamation process, which will begin this fall and then continue through next year's growing season there. So still on target, very soon, coming weeks and months here, get that system in service, ready for the winter time to come here. So that is the last of my formal comments. I know there were some questions that came in, talking one of the questions here about the pipeline network and how that's operating versus pipeline utilization versus crude by rail utilization. And, when we think about that, 1.34, over 1.3 million barrels a day that's produced, you start factoring in how much gets refined in the state, how much goes out, roughly 140,000 barrels a day on train rail movements out of the basin. So you got a little over 1 million barrels a day that gets spread out and put onto our pipeline networks, leaving North Dakota. Total pipeline capacity exiting North Dakota is a little over 1.5 million barrels per day. So roughly about a 70% utilization of the broader system for pipeline movement. So we're certainly in a good position. That leaves some good wiggle room if there's maintenance or downtime on any of those systems. Again, a pretty healthy balance to make sure that we've got adequate means of moving that crude oil to market. Another question that came in asking about some of the contracting changes on the Dakota Access pipeline, and from what I can find and what's available out there publicly, which from our standpoint, there's a lot that we don't know, that things that take place in the private sector outside of the public realm of information. You look at the tariff structure, there's typically a 7-year and a 10-year structure. This summer, anyone potentially that was on one of those 7-year contracts that could have rolled off and then potentially being impacted by either recontracting or being put into that spot marketplace where those prices are higher. So certainly well aware that there were contracting implications or potential changes that we could see impacting pricing and netbacks here in the Bakken, but I think it's far too soon to put any real numbers on what that looks like at this time. But a great question and something that I'm trying to watch very closely. I think I answered the one about rail shipments jumping. The wildfire question, So the best intel I was able to get from folks in the field and industry information out there in the immediate, days and hours following, potentially over 100,000 barrels per day impacted in just the immediate response of those tragic fires. In the following days, as systems were being brought back online, equipment and systems are being assessed for any type of damage, typically kind of in that 50 to 80,000 barrel per day decrease for the period of about a week. If I had to give a number, my best estimate total barrels that will be impacting the October numbers. At this time, my best estimate is right around 500,000 barrels potentially removed from those October numbers. So October, we will certainly see that. Until the official numbers come in, it's real difficult to say with any certainty exactly what the impact was, but that just gives you some perspective and scale of some of our best estimates here at this time. So any other questions, Bridget?
No.
Okay,
questions.
great. Well,
Thank you.
Dave got a question. Yep.
You said 500,000 barrel possible.
Possible. Yes.
Possible.
Yep.
How long were these oil wells down, do you know?
I think it depended. So if, your team may have better answers, but I think it just system dependent. Some may have been down just a very short time in the immediate response and just from an abundance of safety and caution. Others, whether there was electrical infrastructure damaged, servicing those locations, those may have taken longer to get brought back online. So that's kind of the best intel that I've got. Any other comments or thoughts?
The department asked operators for voluntary shut-ins on that Saturday. I can't remember the exact date, but we had a very, very positive response and a very quick response from operators related to the voluntary shut-ins. Several days later, in our internal meetings that we were meeting every morning as a team with the field staff, we had estimates of 300 to 400 wells that were shut in still after kind of the worst part of the fire had concluded. And then I think the other day we got some estimates that there's still roughly 150 that were shut in that had more significant damage. So, but those are again, like Justin said, are estimates from us.
So those 100 to 150 did suffer some damage then.
Well, it could have been just electrical infrastructure.
Could have
Electrical infrastructure is not.
power
Yeah.
heading to location, some type of impact.
Sure.
Not exactly sure of the exact impact date.
Some did have like wooden structures on
Yeah.
location got burnt up and
We have another question. Do you have any sense of how full pipelines out of the back end, such as that hole, are currently? This is from Bloomberg News.
Okay, yeah. So roughly, again, looking at that 1 million barrels per day, when you start backing into, so about 70%, I think is a fair estimate for kind of how the pipeline system as a whole is operating. So, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.